Protesting has become de rigueur for some people, especially over the last few months in Victoria. After all, it's our democratic right, and there have been so many issues that people have wanted to protest about. We've witnessed the Black Lives Matter protest. There was, of course, the National Day of Action at the Melbourne Shrine, and more recently a protest on the 13th of September at Victoria Markets, which involved, again, Victoria Police. Today, the Informer is about to speak to the leader of the freedom movement. His name is David Weisinger. He's currently taking legal action after being arrested for incitement during that particular protest. David, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
What are the beliefs, you're the leader of the group. What are the beliefs of the group? It's called the Freedom Movement. So tell me about it.
Well, firstly, just to diminish my role, I'm not the leader. I'm one of many voices that are speaking up for human rights.
But you'd have a pretty fair grasp of indeed why you're there and what it's about and what drives you.
Well, predominantly it's about human rights. It's about freedoms. And when the lockdowns occurred, many of us, were knowing that there were threats out there, that there was a risk of the virus. And as it became more apparent that the risk of the virus was not as high as what had been stated, a lot of us looked around at the statistics and the data, and what we saw was something more alarming than the deaths and cases that they were talking about with every press conference. And that was about people that were in nursing homes not being able to see loved ones. They were dying of loneliness. I worked in mental health for a lot of years. I know the risks associated with being, just left out to pasture, essentially, not being able to see anyone, not being able to have your business running. These are things that have affected people. Mental health is a huge issue. Underreported suicides, domestic violence. And these are the issues that we were there to talk about because they were not being talked about on mainstream media. Nowhere was it being covered. And so many of us, myself included, there was a whole gamut of things that we were there to protest, essentially to have our voice heard. And that's more or less why I was there.
That was the purpose of the protesting. What did you hope to achieve with the protests?
Well, I knew that there was a risk that there was going to be police presence. And I suppose from a naive perspective, because I had not protested anything in my life before, I just thought, look, we are turning into a police state, and okay, I've become aware of it, but does everybody else know? And as I said on my Facebook page when I was talking about these issues, I'm willing to be arrested if it means that other people get to see. That is naive. I was arrested. I've been arrested several times, and that was really what I was trying to do, was have a voice.
You've been more than arrested. You've been charged with incitement.
I have.
For the involvement in organising the protest at Victoria Markets. Sum it up briefly for us. What actually happened that day?
Well, I attended the protest with a few other people. It would have been maybe 500. We were just, the location was the Victoria Market, and the reason that had been chosen is because it would not be so easy to identify people. I didn't necessarily agree with that location. I did not determine it. I wanted to be able to say to everyone to attend, but that just wasn't what happened. So on the day I attended, I was live filming, and on that day I was what has now come to a very, I guess, a known about term, or more known, is this term of kettling, where the police surround you, divide you, keep you basically detained. And whereas before you may have been socially distancing, once they do that, they circle in on you tighter and tighter. Eventually there was a splinter group that ran across the road at Peel Street. I decided not to follow because it looked dangerous to me. I was filming, and within maybe a minute or two of that happening, I was arrested.
Now, during that time, the protest on the 13th of September would have been under the most stringent of the COVID restrictions that had been imposed by the Victorian government and Daniel Andrews.
Yes.
You chose to wear a mask or not wear a mask?
I do not wear a mask, no.
Why? I mean, when you consider that it was mandatory and the government is making sure, or has been trying to make sure, that people abide by that from day one. Well, in fact, early on they didn't want us to wear a mask, but from the moment they made it mandatory, why didn't you wear a mask?
It is my belief that generally, I will adhere to laws and rules. I've not been in trouble with the law.
Yeah.
I see myself as a critical thinker, and when these laws were passed down, myself and many others said this should not be coming to pass, and I will not just do something because the government tells me when I know better. And when I say I know better, that is, I looked into masks, I researched them. I was aware that this is just something that is really barbaric and tyrannical, and I did not consent to what the government was suggesting.
Do you have a medical condition?
Well, no, I don't. But what I would say is that I've put one on and I gag when I put one on. Now, I don't know if that's psychological or it's some other issue, but I cannot wear one and I will not wear one.
Now, you've made serious allegations against the police force on that day over what transpired, over the corralling or the kettling, as you put it. Can you give us a bit more about that?
Well, it's clear to me that, and you did briefly mention about Black Lives Matter, and
Yes.
that there is a clear difference between how the police handle anyone who is dissenting against the government versus people who are there to protest another cause. From my observation and being part of it and on the ground, and also have been, I've been assaulted on another occasion, which is the 23rd, which we haven't talked about. But the technique is basically that they are army, they are boots on the ground. This is what they are army, and that they are cracking down on dissent. They have targeted myself and other people, and this is what they are doing, is that they identify people who they think are leaders within the movement, people who can do some damage to their brand, and that's what it's about, branding.
Do you think you've been picked out?
I have no question. I've spoken at length to other people who have been targeted, myself and Tony Pakura, who's also on the civil action, and again he was targeted because he's someone who can do some damage to the branding. Now,
when you were being arrested at the protest at Victoria Markets, I believe that one of your claims is that the police yelled at you and didn't give you the right to make a phone call.
This is correct. Yeah. When I was brought to, firstly I was brought to West Melbourne Station, and they had a bit of a chuckle. They didn't seem to take this very seriously. There seems to be a clear distinction between officers who are just have been on the job for a while and these new guys who've been brought in. So I was brought into West Melbourne, processed, and then I had to wait for a few hours, and then I was shipped off to Box Hill.
Was there any verbal exchanges between both you and the police?
Not really. I was in a cell and I was just waiting for the informant.
The reason I ask is because police are trained to negotiate when they see someone who's active, who appears to be angry, and of course, when that action takes place, as you can imagine, anything that you say after that takes on a slightly different hue, a different taint, a different nuance.
Yes.
So, did you engage with them in a war of words?
No, that's not really my style. I certainly wasn't angry at any time, even when they were treating me as they did. Maybe an internal rage, but externally I didn't have much to say, other than to ask, what are they doing? Why are you doing this?
But you're not anti-police, as you've said to us
No.
from the beginning. You've never done this before.
No.
It's this current time that's created so much turmoil and so much angst. What do you make of the Victoria Police? Are you anti the police, or just in these actions?
It's getting
Because I
harder.
understand people have a right to protest, which is how we started the interview. But we've been reliably told time and time again we need to do it peacefully.
Yes.
Why has it got to that stage where people are being arrested, people are screaming at one another, agitating, and so on? Just give us a sense of that, because we're trying to get remember there are a lot of people who weren't there and are guided by either some of the imagery and the media likes to go
Yes.
and use, and everyone, even the activist groups, use media that suits their
Yes.
purpose or their vision or their version of the
Right.
events. So explain to me, why not be peaceful? By number, just by number. Show them up.
These are really good points, and from my perspective, I've attended now 3 or 4 rallies, and the majority, the vast majority, it's almost categorical that people are there like me. We are not 18-year-olds, we're not 20-year-olds. Generally, we're people who are in our 30s and 40s.
Yep. You weren't busting just for
No.
to play the event.
No.
Okay.
This was about that our livelihoods had been taken away under something that just did not seem right to us, and so we wanted a platform.
Let's try and get to the bottom of it slightly different. Let's take a different tack. Before we finish the interview, if you were in the position of those policemen
Yes.
or women,
Yes.
what would you have done differently to cope with the voices, the angry voices, that is, the voices that have been frustrated enormously by what they've been asked to do? How would you expect to behave, and how do you think you could improve things? Because we need to do this. We can't keep fighting one another.
Absolutely.
So what can we learn? What would you do differently if you were the man or woman in blue?
I've thought about this question quite a few times, and I have a few friends who are police, ex-police.
Good.
And the more that I go into this situation, the more I'm 100% certain that I would stand down. I cannot be part of something where you are being used by the state to oppress your own citizens.
You said they were like troops. Troops can't stand down. They've got to follow orders.
I'm not talking about on the day. I think that once you get to the day, that's a whole different situation.
So let's talk about the day. You're there. What do you do differently? You're now wearing blue. How do you make that situation better?
I don't think that you can. If you've been given orders to crack down on someone, to target people, to kettle, what can they do? This is the old adage, I'm just following orders. And they are. So I don't hold them responsible other than as a person to say that you are in a position where you are having to do these things which are part of a tyranny.
The reason I push this point is because incitement is a serious charge.
Yes.
You're going to face court?
Yes.
Yeah? What legal redress are you expecting?
I don't believe that we're going to win. We are part of a number of people who have been charged with incitement, and essentially this is us versus the state to say that the right to political assembly, and it seems to me that we do not have one. Whether it's for a pandemic or anything else, it has been clear from the court decisions that have been handed down so far that in Victoria we do not have rights.
David Weisinger, I appreciate you coming in and giving us your perspective and a sense of what the mood was like and how you sought to do what you needed to do. Let's see how this plays out, and let's see if we can catch up again and talk about and what we've learned from this whole exercise. David Weisinger joining us on The Informer. Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me.